Welcome to the Power of Your Voice podcast with your host, Johnny Gorky. You have the power to overcome challenges and fears. Let my voice and the voice of many others show you how to transform these challenges into opportunities. To learn more about future podcasts and read episode show notes, check out my website at www.thepowerofyourvoice.com.
This is episode 17, and today's guest is Thakur Wint. He is a recruiting industry expert with more than 8 years of successful experience in full life cycle recruiting and business development. He has the ability to foster relationships with C-suite senior executives for IT operations. Thakur knows that people hire people, not resumes. Companies are not just looking for a set of qualifications that match a job description. To ensure a complete match, Thakur extensively interviews both companies and candidates to find out who they are and what they are looking for. As companies and as people, Thakur is most fulfilled when helping people grow professionally. His vision and ability to nurture relationships leads to long-term solutions and success. Thakur has placed over 2,000 professionals in the New York City market alone. Thakur enjoys the thrill of a candidate's enthusiastic yes to an offer and an equal pleased hiring manager who just landed a top performer. Perhaps even more satisfying is a successful recruiting superstar and then seeing them develop a billion-dollar product. Welcome to the Power of Your Voice, Thakur. You are a top recruiter in New York City. Some would say being a recruiter is a challenging job, yet you have been able to place over 2,000 professionals. What has been your biggest challenge as a recruiter, and how were you able to overcome them?
That's a great question. I think my biggest challenge as a recruiter, I'd have to say a lot of folks, they are looking to change industries. Many professionals that I speak to, they, have been in a certain industry for a lengthy period of time, and they're looking to move into a different industry. And their expectation is that they're going to be earning the same amount of money. And it's very challenging to find those types of roles because as you know, you generally have to work your way, from the bottom to the top. So, if you're changing industries and you're changing careers, oftentimes, unfortunately, you have to sort of lower your expectations as far as what you're going to be earning. And I think a lot of the conversations that I have with candidates, I really have to almost inspire them to stick it out in their industry, but perhaps work for a different company where the culture is, healthier and they feel a little bit more comfortable, or they're working for a company where the hours aren't so strenuous. Really dig into what they're unhappy with, and where I can find an opportunity for them and make them a happier person.
Yeah, well, and I think too, sometimes a big challenge too is like sometimes people, it's like, they don't have any experience, but they expect to get this high salary, which, it's just not reasonable.
That's a situation that I have run into time and time again over the past, 10 years or so. One of the, it's almost, comical. I've had candidates say to me, well, I don't understand why you're not submitting me for this management position, because if I don't, ever have the opportunity to work as a manager, then, how am I ever going to how am I ever going to get that title? And the bottom line is, you have to work your way up. It's a career. There's a difference between a job and a career. If I could bartend, for the rest of my life, I would, but that's a job and it's not a career. So, you really need to, dig down deep and find a company that you like and work your way from the bottom to the top. I think that's something that it's something that's lacking at times, I think, with some of the younger candidates that I work with. That work ethic is sometimes lacking.
Exactly. And sometimes too, the thing I've noticed, like today I was talking to a guy. I was like, can you submit your resume to me? He's like, I don't have a resume. He sent me a bunch of pictures of jobs he's done. I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
Sure. Yeah. And that's another, I think that might be a product of sort of the day and age that we live in, this digital day and age that we live in, where, communication has kind of gone to the wayside. Verbal communication has changed. People don't speak to each other as often as much as they used to. It's all sort of done, well, not, all, but a lot of communication is done electronically. A lot of folks, they don't write quite as much as they used to. They write a lot, but communication has just changed. So I think folks, they don't understand the concept of sort of putting together a resume.
So for somebody who's thinking about, they want to take it to the next level and start working with the recruiter, because, some people are just not familiar with recruiters. What's some suggestions that you would give to them before they contact a recruiter? Like, well, what are some things that they should have already set up before they contact somebody?
I think first and foremost, it's really important to be, willing to work with a recruiter. There are a lot of people who shy away from recruiters because they think that, recruiters are going to take a cut of their salary or of their money. And there are bogus agencies out there, quite frankly, that do that. So, I think it's important for candidates to speak to recruiters with an open mind. I think it's also important to realize, much like in any profession, there are good recruiters and there are bad recruiters. And unfortunately, in this profession, there doesn't seem to be much of a gray area or much of an in-between. And it's generally pretty easy to determine whether or not a recruiter is worth your time as a candidate, quite frankly, or not. And I think one of the telltale signs is their level of communication with you throughout the process, whether they help you get a job or whether they don't help you get a job. They should constantly be in touch with you, providing with feedback, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, so you know exactly where you are in the process. And if you're not getting that feedback, instead of getting frustrated with the recruiter, just move on and work with a different recruiter. Because like I said, much like in any profession, there are good recruiters and there are not so good recruiters. So, that's one thing I would do. I think you made a really great point about making sure that you have a resume prepared. If, you don't have a resume and you have access to a computer, I know not everybody has, a working computer at home. There are resources. You can go to the library. There are, many organizations that you can go to and you can utilize computers and printers for free. Just go to Google and look up a resume template and, you can just replace the information in the resume with your information, and just use that as a baseline and be honest with your recruiter. If you're working with the recruiter, say, hey, I never put a resume together before. This is the first resume I ever completed. Can you, advise me on what, I should, on what I should do? Can you give me some advice about, what I should remove, what I should add? Can you help me with it?
Yeah, exactly. And, just one thing to throw in there as well is like, sometimes people don't realize it's important to always have a resume and always keep it updated because like, a lot of people, they'll use LinkedIn, they'll be working in a certain job title and they don't realize people might contact them with a better position where they can make a lot more money because sometimes people don't really realize their value and they could be worth so much more money and people will contact them, which is why they should always have that resume because you never know when someone might reach out to you.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point. One of the things that I have learned to do is to constantly take note of, what I'm doing and what I'm accomplishing, because quite frankly, if you hold a job for a number of years, it's, you forget these amazing things that you may have accomplished. So, my recommendation to everyone, whether you are a, entry, person and you're looking for an entry level position, or you're a C-level executive, always make note of the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and definitely any accomplishments or accolades that you've achieved. If you're in a sales position or a position that has anything to do with numbers, make sure that you keep track of those numbers. So, as an example, if you were to look at my resume, when I was doing sales with a company called Grant Associates, I always, I met and I exceeded my sales goals, and I put those numbers on my resume. So yeah, I completely agree with you, Johnny. I think that you always need to make sure that your resume is updated and current. And from a recruiter standpoint, one more thing that I would advise people to do, and you touched upon this, is to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is updated with accurate information as well. And not just accurate information, but detailed information, because there are times where, a candidate hasn't sent me their resume and I'm interviewing them and I'm going off of their LinkedIn profile, and they've done all of these amazing things, but none of that is reflected in their LinkedIn profile. So yeah, I think your LinkedIn profile should really mirror your resume. And you should always take note of, the special things that you accomplish.
That's excellent advice. Yeah, because exactly. Sometimes people, they might be working for a company, like some people might stay at a company for 10 years and they forget about all these great, amazing things that they've done, where they might be able to be hired at another company. But if they don't put that in their resume, they're never known. They might be overseen and not be, I guess you could say, taken seriously.
Yeah. I definitely agree that, you got to make sure that your resume is current. And then, on the flip side of the coin too is, oftentimes I review resumes, and it will, a person's resume will say that they're working at a particular company and they're still with that company. And so I'll ask them about their current position, and they'll say to me, "Oh no, I'm actually not with that company anymore. I left back in November and it's now March, and they have a totally different job." And that completely paints it paints an entirely different picture about that candidate. There are times where I speak to people and their resume indicates that they're still currently working with a company and they left a year ago or 2 years ago. And that makes a huge impact on, my impression about that person, and their ability to keep a job for, a period of time, being able to hold a position for, some time and not jumping around goes a long way when, you're looking for a career.
Exactly. Well, one thing to point out too is, like, for somebody who's listening to this episode right now, who, maybe they've been working at a company for a long time and they've been thinking about maybe getting into recruiting. And, when you first start recruiting, you're not going to, the first day, you're not going to recruit, five people. So, how long, when you first started recruiting, how long did it take you before you were able to place your first job? And once you became really, really good at it, how long did it take you about?
Sure. So my sweet spot for some reason has always been 5 months. I think statistically and generally it takes a little bit longer than that. So, within the first 5 months of working at, the first staffing agency that I was with, it took me 5 months to become the top performer in the company, which was a huge achievement. And I, was promoted, within, I think it was within a year and a half of the company. I went from being, an account manager, senior account manager. Every company has sort of a different title for recruiters. In that particular company, we were called account managers. So for, the average recruiter, I would say it probably takes 6 months to sort of hit your stride. And it depends on the type of agency that you're with. I can tell you that if you are working for an elite agency, if you're working for, an Adecco, and that's a company that I work for. If you're working for a Randstad, and that, is a company that I work for, these are two of the largest staffing agencies in the world. If you're working for a Michael Page, again, which is one of the largest staffing agencies in the world, if you're not producing and you're not, filling positions within 6 months, you will be terminated. It's a revolving door. So, oftentimes, unfortunately, it takes people about 6 months before things really click. So, I suppose my advice to people who are looking to get into recruitment, it might pay off to work for, maybe a mid-sized company first, maybe even a smaller company first to get your feet wet and learn the ropes and get comfortable calling people and making cold calls and selling and speaking to candidates, and then building your way up to a larger company. I think a lot of people might disagree with that. A lot of people say that it's much easier to go from a larger company to a smaller company, which I agree with. But in my experience, it was actually helpful to work for sort of a mid-sized company and then work my way up to one of those elite staffing agencies.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and especially when people start recruiting, the hardest thing for a lot of people is the cold calls. How are you able to overcome that? Because a lot of times people, honestly, they have a hard time being rejected, or they think that they are being rejected personally, but it's not personal.
Yeah, it's absolutely not personal at all. So to answer your question, I think the first cold call that I ever made was, it was roughly 10 years ago, and it was the most uncomfortable conversation I've ever had. It was very evident to the person that I was speaking to that I was nervous. She almost fed into it. She didn't treat me very well. That's the best way that I can put it. So much like anything in life, I think, in order to get good at cold calling, for anybody who doesn't know what cold calling is, it's just, it's calling somebody that you have no relationship with and trying to, do business with them in some way, shape, or form. In order to get good at it, it's just a matter of repetition and just doing it over and over and over again. And the best thing to do in the beginning, and it's something that I actually advocate for people who have been doing it for quite some time as well, is to have a script in front of you. So sort of what talking points you want to hit, and you don't have to say things verbatim, but you just want to make sure that you're, articulating the message that you want to articulate, that you're asking the questions that you want to ask. To be honest with you, if you can get on the phone with somebody, one of the things that I'll say is if somebody says no to you, that is not a rejection. That's merely a response. They're responding to you. And again, just going back to kind of like numbers and statistics, it usually takes 6 to 8 tries before you begin doing business with a company that you're cold calling or warm calling, or maybe you have, it's a hot lead and you have a really good relationship with somebody at the company. Oftentimes it takes, sort of 6 to 8 tries before you'll either begin doing business with the company, or you may come to the reality that, or the realization that you just can't do business with that company at that time. But something may spring up in the future. The first client that I ever brought in, it took somewhere between 6 to 9 months for the relationship to come to fruition. And once it did, develop and bloom, if you will, it was a really, really successful account. And I made a lot of money, and my company made a lot of money, and we placed a lot of really amazing, talented people with the company. So.
Wow, that's great advice. And yes, the most important thing is do not give up and have consistency.
Exactly.
So to go into the next question, so what exactly would you say makes a great recruiter?
Sure. So there are different types of recruiters. There are some recruiters who are only responsible for recruiting, and then there's a dedicated salesperson. So somebody will go out and they'll bring in business, and they'll say, okay, I have a human resources position that I need to fill, or I have an administrative assistant position that I need to fill. Here are the requirements, and they'll hand you the requisition or the job order. And as a recruiter, your only job is to recruit for that position, to find people who are qualified for the role. And then there is the type of recruiting that I'm currently doing, which is working as a full desk recruiter, which means that you are doing both jobs. You're doing sales, which is cold calling or whatever the case may be, reaching out to your network. You're bringing in business, so you're reaching out to a company, and they say, hey, I'm looking for an engineer, and then you're actually finding people to fill that particular position. You're sourcing candidates to fill that particular position. So I guess I just wanted to clarify that there are two sort of different types of recruiters.
What would be a bad recruiter? So like when this person calls you, if you're a company or you're a candidate, you need to run.
Sure. So if a recruiter reaches out to you and you tell them exactly what you're looking for, and they say, okay, great, I have a role that you'd be the perfect fit for, and they run down the role to you, and it is the antithesis or the opposite or just very different than what you told them you were looking for, in my opinion, that's a bad recruiter. That's somebody that didn't listen to you. That's somebody that's trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, or a round peg in a square hole. I think it's paramount as a human being, but certainly as a recruiter, to listen. You have to listen to your candidates. You have to listen to your clients. You have to find out, what their needs are. You have to find out, what they want, what their aspirations are, what they're good at. And, you can't push them into a role because that you're going to receive a bonus, or that you're going to receive commission if they get placed in that role, and that it's low-hanging fruit, and that your client is really going to love this person. I think that it's important to really listen to what that person is looking for, and to do your very best to find them that role. So to answer your question, that you're on the phone or interacting with, in my opinion, a bad recruiter when they're trying to place you in a job that has nothing to do with what you told them you're looking to do.
Exactly. And that's really great, because that's the things like, and this goes into the next question, it's all about aligning the candidate with the best company to have a company get the best possible candidate for that position. So this goes in the next question, as I was just saying. What is the secret to nurturing relationships that lead to long-term success?
I think the secret to nurturing relationships that lead to long-term success, the secret is to be honest. You have to be honest. You have to listen, and you have to genuinely care about the other person's best interests and the company's best interests that you are supporting. And if you're working with a candidate, the candidate's best interests. So, the agenda, at the end of the day, your company has to make money. You have to think about your bottom line, and you have to think about your top line, and you always want to make sure that you're, making a margin and making money. But I think that it's really important for you to have integrity and for you to be honest and to make sure that your customers' needs are forefront of your mind when you're working with them. You just have to make sure that that the expectations are set, that you set those expectations with your client, and you set those expectations with candidate, and you make sure that you are, doing your very best to fulfill those expectations. And like I was saying before about honesty, if for some reason or another you are unable to fulfill, their expectations, just be candid with them about that. So, if a client says to you, I'm looking for 15 data scientists or something like that. If you don't have the bandwidth to fill all 15 roles, I think that it's really important to be honest with the client in the beginning, and maybe let them know that you're able to fulfill perhaps 5 of those roles if you have the bandwidth to do that. So it's just important to set expectations in the beginning, and to be honest, and to listen, and to be communicative throughout the process with both clients and with candidates.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing. It's like, people just want you to be completely honest with them. And that's how you're going to build these long-term relationships. Because, sometimes with some people, they're just thinking about short-term gains. But when you take care of your candidates and you take care of your clients, anytime that they need a new person, you're going to be the first person that they call. Same thing with a candidate. You might place someone with a company, maybe 5 years from now, they decide to move with their family to another state. You'll be the first person they contact because you're a person that uses integrity and you really care about that person. And that's why it's so important to build those long-term relationships with people.
Exactly. And I think, in my experience, the best clients oftentimes are clients that are referred by clients that you've done a great job with, and clients who you've been honest with and been transparent with, and had that high level of communication with. And the same thing goes for candidates. When you've built that trust with the client, or with a candidate rather, and you have that high level of communication with them and that high level of honesty with them, they will 9 times out of 10, if they refer somebody to you, it's going to be a stellar person that you can place, and ultimately you'll make money.
Yeah, exactly. So going to our next question here, because it's all about building these relationships. But when you first start out, what are things that you do when you first are interviewing a company or interviewing a candidate? What do you look for in both parties?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I suppose I'll start with a client. It's really important when you speak to a client that you're really looking to accomplish 3 things when you reach out to a client. So the first thing is you want to get them on the phone, and you want to have a conversation with them. Or in this day and age, if you don't get them on the phone, you want to share perhaps messages via LinkedIn, or sometimes people even prefer emails, quite frankly. The second step is you want to meet them in person. And my recommendation to anybody who is in the field or looking to get in the field is, when you meet with your client, you ideally want to meet them at their place of business where your candidates are going to be working, if you have the opportunity to do that. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want to get a sense of the culture, and you want to be able to properly articulate and sell to the candidate why this is going to be a great environment for them to work. So, I'm going to give you, I guess, a couple of examples of, clients that I decided to work with and clients that I decided not to work with. So, a client that I decided not to work with invited me to their office, and, first of all, they were late to meet with me. And they left me sitting in the waiting room for quite some time. And then upon meeting them, they were very scatterbrained. Their office was disheveled. They were talking about, their work office space was in like a 6th floor walk up, and they were talking about like a rat infestation that they had at their office. And, those are just a few of the details. And long story short, by the end of that, intake meeting, I decided that was not a client that I wanted to represent and work with, because there was no possible way that I could sell that to a candidate and that I would feel comfortable, placing anybody in that particular environment. It was very uncomfortable. I did not feel, I felt like it would be a disservice to place anybody with that particular company. So that's an example of a client that I opted not to work with. On the flip side of the coin, if you meet with a client and they're prompt, I think that's very telling. If they're not prompt, just again, being communicative and letting you know in some way, shape, or form that they're not going to make the meeting at that exact time is very helpful. When they sit down with you, if they're very knowledgeable about the company, I think that's very telling. When the company has a strong mission statement, and that's something that their employees sort of live by. I think that is very telling. When the company has a great story, and what I like to call sizzle, something that I can really sell to the candidate, that's really telling. And then another thing that's really important, of course, are salaries and wages. And if you're working with a company and what they're offering people is below market or well below market, that's a telltale sign that you probably don't want to work with them. I like to work with companies that offer people good wages. I like to work with companies that offer people, good, if not, great benefits. I like to work with companies at the end of the day that really take care of their people. So from a client perspective, those are the things that I'm looking for.
That's excellent advice, because that's the thing, for people who are getting into recruiting, they have to realize not every client is going to be the perfect fit. And just like you said, it's like, when you're working with a candidate, you want to be this is someone's livelihood. They have a family, this is something they're going to do for a long time. You want to make sure that they align them with a company that has good morals. They're going to be around for a long time. So going to the next question. So what it is when interviewing a candidate, what do you look for? Because, that's the same thing, just like with clients, not all candidates are going to be the perfect fit. It's not always going to be the person you want to work with.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I'm working with candidates, I don't know, everybody has sort of a different opinion as to how long it takes for you to formulate whether, you want to work with somebody or not. Everybody says, within 30 seconds, a recruiter, will either want to work with you or not. That's not really true. Sometimes, you look at somebody and you think that you might not be able to work with them. And then upon speaking to them or learning about their background, things might change. So I guess the point that I'm trying to get at is, appearance is important. And I'm not saying that, you need to be, Miss America or, Mr. Universe. But, when you are interviewing with a recruiter or the company, you always want to make sure that you are, I don't want to say dressed to impress, but, you want to make sure that you understand the culture of the company. So, as an example, if you're interviewing for, a position in, financial services, you want to make sure that you're wearing business professional attire. If you are interviewing with a retail brand and they have, a particular style, that's something that you might want to emulate when you go on an interview. And quite frankly, all of this information is on the internet. If you go on the internet and you type in, I am interviewing with, the Gap, what should I wear? There are message boards, and there, if you go on glassdoor.com, there's a ton of information about how you should prepare for these interviews. So if I sit down with a candidate and they're interviewing for a high level position with a financial services business, and they're wearing a t-shirt and ripped jeans and sneakers, it just, for me, I may work with that person, but it may involve a little bit of coaching. It really depends on how the conversation goes, but it's not a great first impression. So I would definitely recommend when you're, interviewing, just make sure that you are, as they say, dressed to impress, and dressed appropriately for the interview. So, appearance is important. In addition to that, we touched upon this a little bit earlier. It's always important to make sure that you bring a current resume with you. I would always recommend bringing multiple copies of your resume. So, I've been in situations where I've had really, really brilliant candidates sit down with me and they have no resume, and they have this air about them that they don't need a resume because they're almost too good for the interview or they're too good for the job. And I don't want to work with that person. And then on the flip side of the coin, I've had folks who are very, very junior, maybe entry-level candidates, and they have, 50 copies of their resume printed out, and they are dressed to impress, and they are prepared. And I want to work with that person. I want to coach that person. I want to do everything in my power to get that person the best job that I possibly can. Even if I earn, less money or whatever the case may be, because, they put in effort for me, and I want to reciprocate that effort. So that's another thing that I look for. Another thing is, if you're interviewing for a particular job, do your research about the company. We live in a day and age where there is, almost infinite information about everything on the internet. And, you want to make sure that you are preparing and a little bit about the company, So, if you're interviewing with a company, you should know if they're, maybe a private company or a public company. You should certainly know what industry the company is in, if you're interviewing, and I'm just going to go back to retail. If you're interviewing for a position at H&M and I say, hey, what do you know about H&M? And, you tell me that, you think that they're a construction company, then, you're off to a bad start. So definitely know about the company that you're interviewing with. If they're a public company, maybe know price they're at in the stock market, what their shares are being sold at, perhaps know about some of the folks that founded the company and the history of the company. You just want to make sure that you do your research, because, the more effort you put into these interviews, the more effort people are going to, are going to sort of put in for you. So.
Excellent advice. Because, that's the thing. The companies want to hire somebody who you can tell that they took the initiative and they really, really care. And just like you mentioned as well, which I think is a really good point, because, one thing I've realized sometimes in the past, when you just tell somebody, make sure you dress nice, everyone's definition of dressing nice is different. So yes, go online, research the company, and find out exactly what you should wear, because, yes, first impressions matter. That's so extremely important.
Yeah, exactly. There's I think a psychological term for it. It's called the primary recency theory. And generally the first impression that you make with somebody, the earliest impression that you make with somebody is sort of the impression that sticks out in their minds. So it's always important to put your best foot forward and try to make sure that you're making a great first impression, if you can. And you can do that by just making sure that you're prepared. So if you need to get up, an hour early and iron your shirt, if you need to, get up an hour earlier and print out extra copies of your resume, make sure that you do that. It's really important to put in that effort.
Exactly. And definitely make sure that you give yourself more than enough time to get to the interview. You do not want to be coming late or even, only 2 minutes before the interview starts. So on your LinkedIn profile, you have a really good quote that I love. What do you mean when you say people who avoid failure also avoid success? Because that's a really, really good quote.
Sure. So in my experience, it's really important to 100% comfortable. An example that we were discussing earlier would be, making cold calls for the first time and how uncomfortable it was in the beginning and how comfortable it became the more and more that I did it. So, unless you put yourself out there, nothing is going to happen for you. Nothing is going to be given to you. So, I think it's really important that you set goals. I think it's really important that you almost create your own personal mission statement and, you do everything in your power to achieve those goals. So, if you want to become a recruiter, or you want to, get into the information technology field, and that requires you to, learn how to code. If you want to do anything in life, you have to take risks, and you have to take the initiative to get things done, because for the most part, unless you're really, really lucky, nothing nothing is going to be handed to you in life. And, the worst thing that anybody can possibly, say to you is no. And then, you move on from that. So, you just have to keep pushing yourself. You have to keep, something that I learned from Dale Carnegie is, and also Stephen Covey talks about this a lot, is sort of thinking about the end before you get there, right? So you want to kind of think about your destination before you arrive. It's kind of like taking a trip, right? You know where you're going. You know that you're taking a trip to, from New York to Fort Lauderdale. And then you have to figure out in between, how are you going to do that? How are you going to accomplish getting from New York to Fort Lauderdale? And it's the same thing with any goal that you have. You figure out what your goal is, and then you take whatever steps are necessary in order to accomplish that.
That's so true. So this is important too, because sometimes people realize, they're going to go to this company and they think, I'm just going to do the status quo. Companies are not looking for somebody that just does the job. They're looking for leaders. That's what they want. They want people that they can promote within the company. So what do you think makes a great leader?
That's a really good question. So I think a great leader is, I think, it's important. I think narrative is really important. I think, sort of creating, imagery is really important. So a great manager, I would say, I'm going to go backwards. So if you're navigating through a jungle, right, a manager is a person who is walking through the jungle with you. You're trying to get from point A to point B, and the manager is telling you, okay, chop down these bushes, cut down these trees, create this path. And then a leader is sitting atop those trees and they're telling you where to go, right? So I think that's kind of a good way of looking at leadership. Leaders are looking at the big picture. Leaders they have a defined mission statement. They make sure that everybody understands what that mission statement is. I think it's really important for leaders to actually speak to everybody at every level and make sure that they actually participate in the company's mission statement as well. So you kind of feel like you're a part of the company. I think it's really important for leaders to want to replicate what they have done. A leader should not be uncomfortable by another person's success and think that person is perhaps going to take their job. I think a leader should constantly groom people to be successful and to achieve the level of success that they have achieved, and quite frankly, to achieve more success than they have achieved. I think that is really important.
That's so true. A great leader definitely is a person that supports people around them, and they want everybody to step into their own leadership. That's what it's all about. They don't mind if someone else does better than them. They actually encourage it, step into your leadership and do better than I am. That's so extremely important. Being a recruiter, what would you say is the most rewarding part about being a recruiter?
The most rewarding part of being a recruiter is, a lot of times you do a lot of work for your clients, and you do a lot of work for your candidates as well. When you get a thank you, that goes a long way. I can't tell you how many times I've placed people in, pretty high level positions and down to entry level positions, and you don't get so much of an email or an in-person thank you. It's like as soon as they get the job, you never hear from the person again, which is a huge faux pas, which is French for misstep on the candidate's part, because God forbid you lose your job. You may want to have a relationship with that recruiter in the future because they obviously helped you. So the most rewarding part of being a recruiter is just getting a thank you. And there have been times, I remember I helped a young man get his very first job. It was an entry level position. It was down in Brooklyn, matter of fact, at Coney Island. And he got his first job and he started to cry. And, I talked to him. I said, hey, I just wanted to make sure that he was doing okay. And he said, I just want to thank you for helping me get this job, because, now my mom and I don't have to eat out of garbage. And I can't tell you that it really touched my heart. It was one of those moments where I really had to sort of like hold the tears in, because you're affecting somebody's life, and you're affecting somebody's life, family's life, and it's such a special thing. So I think that's something that a lot of times as recruiters we lose sight of, but it's really important to remember that you're helping somebody, and you're affecting their life, in a very positive way.
That's absolutely beautiful. And of course, there's nothing wrong with crying. Crying's a great thing. Because I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes, you might reach out to a person and, they're working at a job. They're not really, really happy, but they're just stuck. And you're able to allow that person to work for a company that has a better culture, then able to make more money, to be able to take more vacations with their family, or buy a better house, a car, or whatever it might be. Hey, maybe they want another kid. So yeah, I mean, you're really helping a person change your life. And that's so incredibly important. And it's awesome. It's great.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And, it's awesome when you have relationships with candidates that are not just one and done. It's kind of cool when you place somebody in a role and they advance within the company, and you keep in touch with them, and you may have placed them in an entry-level position back in 2000, and I'm thinking of specific people right now as I say this. You may have put them in an entry-level role, filled an entry-level role back in 2011 or 2012, and now they're in a managerial position or a director level position, and sometimes they're, it's like they're making more money than you are. And you help them get that first job, and you keep in touch with them. It's really, really special. And it's just great to know that you're affecting people's lives for the better.
That's great. It's a win-win for everybody. Everybody's happy. So one thing I want to mention to you. So I know, you run your own event company, which is incredible. What got you started in the event business, and how did you overcome your challenges of starting your own business? Because, there are a lot of people who might be listening. I've always wanted to start my own business, but I don't know how to do it. So they never do it.
Yeah, so starting a business, it's actually kind of scary how easy it is. It's actually very, very easy to begin your own business, depending on what type of business you decide to open, and the amount of money that you kind of have to invest to open up the business. But it was a huge leap of faith for me. My first corporate position in Manhattan was with an event staffing company. I actually reached out to the principal owner of the company probably 2.5, 3 weeks ago, and I actually, I just shot him a quick text, and I said, hey, Rich, I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you giving me sort of my first opportunity in the city. I don't think I ever told you how it affected my life, and it's led me to where I am now. Thank you.
What got you started in the event business, and how did you overcome the challenges of starting your own business?
So I decided to, I was in the staffing industry. I was working for the largest staffing agency in the world at the time, and extremely burnt out. I was making money, and I was making money for the company. And I had a very candid conversation with one of the vice presidents of the company, Rick. I said, hey, Rick, this is how I feel. I'm very burnt out. I don't know what to do. And he said to me, look, Thakur, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 4 weeks. And he was very gracious. He said, take 4 weeks for yourself. He said, you're going to continue to get paid. You're making money for the company. He said, if you decide that you want to continue working here, you have a job. If you decide that you want to leave and move on to another company, as long as there's no conflict of interest, he said, there isn't an issue with that. He said, if you decide that you want to open up your own business, great. He said, if you want to move to a beach and, lounge around on the beach, and you decide that you don't want to work anymore, just let me know. He said, I want you to go soul search. I decided that after spending a bit of time with my family and doing a lot of soul searching and thinking, that I wanted to open up my own event staffing business, because it was an industry that I really enjoyed. It was a business that I really enjoyed, and it was something that I thought that I could do very well myself. I had a lot of conversations with friends that were in the industry. I had a lot of conversations with family that weren't in the industry and didn't really get it, but I wanted their opinion and their advice. Went ahead and I invested essentially whatever money I had to open up this business. Unfortunately, there wasn't a ton of overhead. It didn't cost millions of dollars to open up the company, but it was a leap of faith because I went from knowing that I was going to receive a paycheck, whether I didn't really do much during the day or not, to opening up my own business and relying on my efforts every single day. So if I if I felt like being lazy and I felt like not picking up the phone and making cold calls and selling, that was less money that I was going to make. That was less food that I could put into my children's mouths, and less food that I could put on my table. So it was certainly a leap of faith.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's the great thing about having a business. You can make as much money as you want, the harder you work, or not make any money. That's something you're able to do. So by having your own business, what would you say is the most rewarding part about owning your own business?
I think the most rewarding part of owning your own business is, it's and for anybody who has kids, you'll probably get this a little bit more. It's like it's like having another baby in a way. So I have two boys myself, and when you open up your own business, it's like your baby, and you get to watch your baby come into this world and then and grow. You sort of nourish it, and you watch the business, and you watch that baby, grow. And, it's just so rewarding. It's very different when, you make a sale and you make a money and you're doing it for yourself, as opposed to making money and doing it for somebody else. It's a very different feeling. It's a very different experience. So yeah, for those of you who want to open up your own business and you have the means to open up your own business and you have that ambition, go out there and do it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. You just mentioned, you have two boys. Some people might be listening to this and like, well, I got 2 kids or 3 kids and, I got a job. I mean, a career, how can I start my own business? How do you find the time to do that? And you're living proof you can do that. How are you able to, balance your life, have, work as a recruiter, run your own company, and then, being married and have 2 boys? How are you able to manage all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my advice to anybody opening up their own business is don't quit your day job in the beginning. I left that large staffing company that I was with, and what I did was I ended up, I opened up my business, but I ended up continuing to staff, but as a contractor for companies, which gave me more flexibility to focus on my business, but also make money at the same time. So I guess my advice to anybody opening up their own business in the beginning, don't quit your day job, you know what I mean? Or, definitely make sure that you have something where money is going to be coming in. So, if you need to, bartend, it's a very easy skill to learn, or whatever the case may be. Make sure that you have some sort of stream of income coming in. And as far as balance, it really boils down to just, spending time and making a plan and putting thought into what you're doing. I think a lot of people live their lives in a very sort of haphazard way, and they don't know what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's important to sit down and figure out, okay, these are my goals. This is what, I would like to accomplish in the next, 30 or 40 days or 60 days or 90 days. This is what I would like to accomplish in the next year. And you should really have a plan on, a day-to-day basis. You should really know what you're doing. I think routine is really important. I wake up every day at 4:00 in the morning. What I like to do, it's called eating a frog. So I'll explain it to you. Eating a frog in the morning means, if you wake up in the morning and you have to eat a frog, if you had to eat a frog, that's more than likely the worst thing you're going to have to do your entire day. Everything else is going to seem significantly easier if you eat a frog in the morning. So the message is, if you have a daunting task, if you have something that's really challenging that you need to do, in your professional life, especially if you own a business, or in your personal life, take care of it first thing. Wake up in the morning, you take care of that big thing, and everything else for the rest of the day, it's going to be smooth sailing. It's going to feel, your day is going to feel a lot easier, and you're not going to have that stress, weighing you down. So that's something that I like to do every single day when I get up, and then I get a little bit of work done. I have my routine. I go to the gym every morning at 5:30. I make sure that I get my kids ready for school, get myself ready for work, and I go about my day. So I think, having a proper routine, having a schedule is really important.
Yeah, have a plan. Having a plan is essential. So for people who are listening to this podcast episode, Thakur, what are like 3 things that you like people to take away when it comes to recruiting as well as business? What are some good things that they should take away from this entire episode?
I think that is, it's a great question. So, what I would like for people to take away, first and foremost, I think it is crucial to take calculated risks, and there's nothing to be afraid of. Like I said earlier, rejection is merely a response, and you never know what's going to happen in the future. So, take calculated risks and put yourself out there, because it's like that old saying, if a tree falls down in the woods and nobody hears it, did it fall down? If you don't make a little bit of noise, if you don't put yourself out there, then nobody's going to hear you. If you don't ask for what you want, then nobody's going to know that. So make sure that you make your voice heard. I think, another thing that is imperative is to think about the end before you start focusing on the beginning. So make sure that you have your end goal in sight, and think about what steps you need to take in order to get there. And I think it's really important to think about the mark that you want to make, while you're here on this earth. And this might sound a little bit morbid, but it's kind of it's sort of an interesting thing to do. And it's something that it's something that I would recommend everybody do. So think about yourself standing at a funeral, and you look down at the grave, and you look down at the headstone, and it says your name on the headstone. You are at your own funeral, and you see your family there, and you see friends there, and you see people that love you in your life there. Think about how you want to be people, and if you kind of maybe jot down how you want to be remembered, and you think about those principles every single day, I think you're really setting yourself up for success. And I think it's much easier said than done, but I think it's an important thing to bear in mind, and an important thing to do.
That's excellent advice. It sounds like you've taken some leadership classes. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, what do you want to be remembered by? So, Thakur, so for anyone who's listening right now, who's like, man, I love this guy, I want to work with him for recruiting, whether they're a candidate or their client, what kind of job positions, what kind of industry do you work in? So that way they know, hey, you'd be the perfect guy for me to work with.
I have an open door policy for everyone. I am a chronic networker. I love meeting people. I love, even if you want to have a conversation with me and the intention is to, your intent is not even to get a job or to work with me. I love hearing people's stories and talking to folks. So I focus on predominantly the information technology industry. So, for businesses, if the business has any IT staffing needs, that's generally what I focus on. I do a little bit of digital as well, However, I will say that over the course of the past 10 years, I have focused on every vertical. So I have placed people in human resources positions, administrative positions, life sciences roles, information technology positions, very entry-level positions like the young man who I helped down in Coney Island. I have filled virtually every type of role that you can possibly think of. So I'm more than happy to work with any business if they're looking to fill a role. And as far as candidates are concerned, I don't care what level you're at in your career. I work with CEOs looking to move to a different company. I work with CTOs, CIOs, COOs looking to move to another company. And I work with people who have never held a job before and they have never created a resume, and I've helped them create a resume. I've just simply asked them to provide me with, some content to put on there, and I've put together that resume for them, and they're working. And I will do everything. And as long as you put in that effort to work with me, I will put in that effort to work with you and make sure that you succeed.
I love that. That's a total win-win. So how can people find you on LinkedIn? And then also for anyone who's listening to this and they live in New York and, they own a company and they want to do like some kind of events, that kind of stuff. What is the name of your company and how can they find you online?
Sure. So I'm probably the only person with this name, maybe ever. So my name is Thakur Wint. You can look me up on LinkedIn. It's Thakur. Last name is Wint, Wint. Johnny and I were joking around in the beginning. It's like my first name is like Tupac Shakur, but with a T. When you see my LinkedIn picture, it may not be what you expect when you look at my name and when you read my name. So you can certainly look me up on LinkedIn. That would be my recommendation as far as connecting with me.
For your event company, how can people find you? Are you on Instagram? Do you have a website?
Yeah, so for the event staffing business, the name of the company is Quintessential. So that's the word quintessential, but with the W, because I wanted to integrate my last name into the word. So it's QWINTESSENTIAL. And the website is quintessential.com. You can connect with me that way. My recommendation would be to go on the website, and you can find my email address on there, or there's a section where you can click on my contact information and connect with me there. And if you are looking for event staff, I have promotional staffers. So as an example, I work with New York Sports Club and Equinox, and when they're looking for promotional staff to work for them, I provide them with that. I provide hospitality staff. So if you're doing a wedding and you need that catering staff, feel free to reach out to me. And then I also have entertainment staff. So your DJs, your burlesque dancers, whatever you're looking for, I can help you out with that.
Thakur, thank you so very much for being on the Power of Your Voice podcast, man. I greatly, greatly appreciate your time, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
You are so welcome.
Johnny here. Thank you for listening to the Power of Your Voice podcast. I'd love to get your feedback on this episode and how it impacted you. If someone in your life could benefit from this episode, share it with them. Check out thepowerofyourvoice.com to read show notes, leave a comment on the blog page, and to stay updated on all future episodes, subscribe to this podcast and leave a 5-star review. Thank you for your love and support.